What do you do if your kids say they want to go back to school? They don't want to homeschool anymore. How do you handle that? That's what we're going to talk about today. I think every homeschool parent hears those words at some point during their homeschool journey. What are you supposed to do? Well, the first thing that you need to do is revisit your why. Why are you homeschooling in the first place? If it is any kind of reason that you know has not changed since you started homeschooling, then you already know what the answer is going to be to your kids. The question is, how are you going to talk about that with them? We'll talk about that in a second. But what about if the reasons that you had are no longer reasons? That's the first thing you need to do, is think about, why are we homeschooling in the first place? If the reason has not changed, then your answer shouldn't change either. If the reason has changed, then maybe it's time to reevaluate. You need to think about what your core reasons were for this decision, and you also need to think about whether or not new reasons have come into play that maybe weren't a part of your decision in the first place. Once you have thought through the reasons why you're homeschooling and you've come to a decision, if you have decided that you want to keep homeschooling, you don't want to send your kids back, then the question becomes, okay, well, how are we going to tell them that? How are we going to talk about that with them? Because chances are they're not going to be super excited to hear you say, nope, sorry, that's not an option. This is the answer that we gave our kids every single time they asked. We've been homeschooling them since the beginning, and I have one that's about to finish her junior year. And so we have heard this actually quite a few times. And every single time we would tell them, you know our reasons for homeschooling. You know why we will never send you to public school. You also know why we can't send you and don't want to send you to private school. So our reasons have not changed, but what we need to do is figure out why you don't want to homeschool anymore. What has caused you to change your mind? Why do you not want to do this? And let's see how we can work together to change the dynamic and make this something that you do want. Whenever my girls would come and tell me that they wanted to homeschool, I'd say, let's talk about what homeschooling could be. Let's talk about what you want it to look like. Do you want to change the approach that we're using? Do you not like the curriculum? Do you want to change our schedule? Do you want me to find more outside classes for you? What is it that would make homeschooling more enjoyable for you? And here's the thing, a kid's education is their education. It is not our education that we are giving to them. We do need to take their opinions into consideration, and we need to make sure that we are doing our best to align with them while still holding on to our values. It is not a sign of weak parenting to say, hey, I want to come alongside you and make this something that you are actually interested in, something that you like. Now, they have a choice too. They can either choose to work with you, to be content, to give reasonable input, and to help you make homeschooling what they want it to be, or they can choose to dig in their heels and say, it doesn't matter what you do, I'm going to not like it. I don't want to homeschool, and so I'm not going to cooperate. Okay, well, they don't have to like it. It is not our job as parents to make sure that our children love every decision that we make. It is not our job to make sure that they are happy all the time. It is our job to provide for them and protect them and love them unconditionally. And so we can do all of those things without them liking what we're doing. They don't have to be happy with the decision. But if they don't like it, they need to decide, am I going to make everybody else miserable, or am I going to bloom where I am planted? And you can't make them make the choice that you want them to make. They need to come to that on their own. So what do you do then if they are making things really difficult? They're not working, they're not doing what they need to do. Then there need to be consequences of that. You are the authority, right? As the parent, we get to have authority over our kids. We need to be respectful with it. We need to not be tyrants with it. But we are allowed to put our foot down and say, I'm sorry, but this is just the way that it has to be. And if you're not going to do the things that you need to do, there are going to be consequences. And here's what they're going to be. And when you're having these conversations, do not make them loud. Do not make them overly emotional. Just have a conversation and lay out, here's what's going to happen if you continue to act this way. Here's what the consequences are going to be. if you continue to be obstinate and stubborn and not do the things that we've asked you to do. Now, at any point, when you think of something that would help you to be able to engage with us more and in a way that is respectful, then we would be happy to work with you on that as long as it does not contradict our values, right? So them saying, okay, yes, I will totally do all my work if you let me stay out until midnight every night with my friends. No, I'm very sorry, that's not an option. Just because they say, oh yeah, I'll work with you. If you do these things, then yes, I will do what you've asked me to do. This isn't like a hostage negotiation here. This is us giving them the opportunity to make mature choices and give feedback that is going to actually improve the situation for everybody. If they choose to use that as like manipulation, you don't have to play that game. You just say, no, I'm sorry, I don't think you don't understand what it is that we're going for here, or you're choosing to treat this in a less than serious and mature way, in which case, when you're ready to talk about this in a mature and serious way, I will be ready to have that conversation. Until then, these consequences are in force. End of story. It doesn't have to be emotional. It doesn't have to be, you just state it matter of fact. And I know inside your blood is boiling when your kids get argumentative and they get angry and they start asserting their independence in a way that we just can't allow them to follow through with at this particular stage of their life. But we, as the mature adult, need to keep our emotions in check and recognize where all this is coming from. Think back to when you were a teenager and when your parents would lay down the law about something and how that made you feel. When you're a teen, and this typically starts happening in the teen years, I suppose I shouldn't be assuming that you're watching because your child is a teenager, but I will tell you that if they have not done this yet, they most likely will when they are teenagers. And that is because it is part of the way that God has wired them to start pushing against authority and want to be independent, make their own choices, do their own thing. And so they're going to start pushing against whatever boundaries are there. And for those of us who homeschool, that's a boundary. We're not putting you in public school. We're not putting you in private school. We're doing this. And so if you have a child that has that kind of personality that's going to start fighting for that independence, they're going to push back. And we need to realize, okay, this is totally normal and natural. It doesn't mean that it's acceptable. It doesn't mean that we can say, oh, this is just what you do. Yes, go ahead, push all those boundaries. That's totally fine. We're not going to fight you on any of this. No, of course not. Just because it's normal and natural doesn't mean that we can allow them to do it. Doesn't mean that we have to give in. We recognize the fact that we cannot control them, that they're going to push back because that's what kids do, and that we are going to set a boundary and say, this is how it's going to be. Here are the boundaries of what I'm willing to do, but inside here, I'm willing to be super flexible. And that's the next thing, is that we need to make sure that we are willing to be super flexible. Maybe up until now you've been doing classical education and your kid's getting real tired of it and they really want to do unschooling or something, completely different. It might be hard to let go of that dream that you had of doing homeschool all the way through high school in this particular way, but we need to realize that it's their education. And so we need to say, okay, this is the way that you want to learn. Okay, I will facilitate that. I will help you make that happen. And we need to let go of our desire to educate them in a specific way all the time. It may be that they come back to that later. It may be that they start homeschooling in the way that they want to, and then they go, oh, this was not what I thought it was going to be. I'm not enjoying this. Or it just doesn't work for their personality or their temperament or whatever. And they may just say, okay, can we just go back to what we were doing? They may not. They may love this other way of homeschooling. And the question really becomes, do I have to enforce a specific approach if they're ticking all the boxes that they need to tick with a different approach that they enjoy more? We may really, really love the values of a particular approach, and we may still be able to work some of that in, but it is their education. And in the teen years, it really does become important to start turning over to them as many of the homeschooling decisions as possible, because they really need to have ownership over their education. And the more we can give them and say, okay, you're going to be responsible for this. You're responsible for learning this stuff. You're responsible for, choosing this stuff, whatever. Come to me if you have questions. Of course, I am more than happy to help you. But they need to start taking responsibility and being accountable for their own learning. And so this is a really great time to let them do that when they come to you and start saying things like, okay, I don't like this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. That might be a sign that it's time to level up how much choice and decision making they have in their homeschool. You may also find that one of the reasons they want to go back to school is because they need more time with people. They need more friend time. That is also totally normal and natural. When kids get into those teen years, they hit puberty, their peer group becomes very, very, very important to them. It is part of that separation that they're going through where they are forming their own identity. They're learning to be independent. And one of the ways they do that is to start separating from their parents. And unless they're an introvert, they're like a raging introvert. Even the introverts start wanting to spend more time with their friends. Maybe not big groups, but like one-on-one. And so unless your child is like a massive hermit who just wants to be by themselves, chances are they're just wanting more time with their friends so that they can get that separation and they can feel that autonomy. And so looking for ways that you can increase that is a good idea, particularly if you know that the friends that they have, even if they're all kind of going through the same thing, you know, nobody's kids are going to be perfect. Yours aren't perfect. Your friends' kids aren't perfect. And so, you know, are they going to make dumb decisions? Yes, sometimes they're going to make dumb decisions. That is part of being a teenager, right? We want them making the dumb decisions now while they are in our home and we can be a soft place for them to land. We don't want them to be so constricted that by the time they leave, they're doing this massive rebellion. We don't want that. It is okay to give them some more freedom, to let them have some more independence, to let them start moving out from being, you know, under your protection all the time and giving them more of that friend time. That is important time for them. So helping them figure out how to do that might go a long way in keeping them content with being homeschooled. The teen years are also that time when they start seeing a lot of those kind of big life milestones, things like prom and senior trip and graduation and going to, you know, football games and all these things that they're seeing in films and on TV all the time. And it's natural to want to fit in. It's another big part of being a teenager, right? They don't want to be the odd one out. They want to be part of a group. They want to be like everybody else. And so that might be a good time if you have not yet started putting them into extracurricular classes or even into core academic classes in homeschool, you know, a la carte class type organizations or a co-op or something like that. That might be a good time to start letting them take some of their classes outside of the home, because that can kind of scratch that itch of being like, you know, the typical teenager who's going to class with their friends and they all have the same homework and they're all working on projects together. And it's natural for them to want to be like everybody else. And so as homeschoolers, you know, the more of us there are, the more opportunities like that begin to come into creation, right? We can start finding a lot more of those things. And again, it can be hard for us to let go of some of that control or all of that control that we've had over all of the curriculum and all of the, you know, approach and the schedule and all that. And it can be really hard to give up that freedom of being able to take off, you know, whatever days you want if you start sending them to classes. But it can really be worth it when it's going to mean the difference between them being content with being homeschooled and them fighting you all the time. There's got to be a balance or you're going to be miserable. So letting them take some of those classes, again, at a place that shares your values, a place where you trust the teachers, in places where you know that they're going to be safe. And if there isn't anything like that near you, maybe it's time for you to step up and start reaching out into your homeschool community and saying, hey, I've got a teenager who really wants to take some classes with other teenagers. I would be willing to teach, fill in the blank with something you would be willing to teach. Would anybody else's kids want to come on board with us and we can start a few classes? Are there any other parents who'd like to teach something? Essentially starting a co-op, right? But you don't have to keep that typical co-op arrangement where every parent is teaching and the kids, you know, go from one to the next. You say, hey, let's just get a few of us together who are willing to host some classes. And hey, it's a little side income for you too, right? Charge X amount per semester or X amount per class, whatever you want to do, find a place where everybody can meet, and then, you know, your kids are getting that time with other people. Hopefully you're finding some other parents who can teach so they can take some instruction from somebody else and not just you, because you're the one that they're trying to get away from, right? But that way, again, you can keep that balance of, okay, well, I'm still, still have a little control here, but I recognize that it's time to turn some of this over to somebody else and let your child have that experience of working with another teacher, working with somebody who's not mom. Things change. That dynamic changes a lot when they start working with somebody else who is not their parent. And that can be good for them too. They need to be able to learn from other people and be exposed to different styles of teaching, different conversations. I can speak from experience. I know that this is hard. We had one daughter in particular who really did not want to homeschool starting when she was about 10 years old. And for 4 years, it was a battle every single year. Every September, she would give us a whole list of reasons why she should be allowed to go to public school. Every single time we had the conversation, I said, honey, you know why we're going to say no. You know that this is not something we're going to do. But tell me what you want homeschooling to look like, and I will do my best. I will bend over backwards to give you what you want. And every year, I would do that. And it didn't mean that she was always sunshine and roses. It doesn't mean she was always happy. But she did learn how to make the best of a situation that she was not thrilled with. That's a life lesson that our kids need to learn. They can't always get their way, or they're never going to learn how to deal with disappointment, how to adjust, how to adapt, how to bloom where they're planted, how to learn how to be content even when a situation is not what they want it to be. These are really important life lessons that kids need to learn. We did, as she got into high school, start working with a hybrid program that was run by friends of ours. Only reason I let her go was because very good friends of ours were the ones that had started it, and I knew we were, we saw eye to eye on all the important stuff. And I knew she would be safe there. I knew she would be loved. They treated her like one of their own. And so I was very comfortable saying, okay, even though this takes me almost completely out of the equation because she takes all of her classes there except for math, it was really hard for me to give up that control. But the way that this particular program works, I do have some say. I am able to say, hey, we're not doing any homework this week, just to let you know. And that's okay. I can do that when I need to. I am still the one creating her transcript. I'm using these classes as kind of outsourcing, but I'm still going to create her transcript in the end. So I can look at what they've done, and if I'm like, I really wish that for world history they had covered XYZ and they didn't, I can still say, hey, in order for you to graduate, we need to spend a couple weeks on this subject because I think it's really important that you know it. That gave her the opportunity to be with other kids, to be with friends, to get that distance from me, having homework, getting to do sports, with a team of kids that she's seeing outside of that, not just at practices, gets to do a graduation, all of those things that she really were very important to her. I didn't want to discount those things. I didn't want to say, oh, just because I think they're not a big deal, you shouldn't think they're a big deal either. She's not me. I didn't want her to feel like her opinions didn't matter. It took a lot of work for me to let go and to turn so much control and so much of our schedule over to somebody else, but it saved our relationship. And in the end, my relationship with my kids is one of my top priorities. No, I will not send them to a traditional public school. I will not send them to a traditional private school. But this was enough of a compromise for me. There was enough there that I felt like this is still giving me some input, but it's allowing my child to have what she wants for the most part, and it saved our relationship. That was super important to me. You need to think about what your values are, whether it's time to start giving your child some more say and involvement in their own education. You need to decide what is more important to me, to keep things the way I want them to be, or to save our relationship so that my child and I are not building this wall that just gets higher and higher and higher over time. It can be hard to let go of our homeschooling dreams, but as long as you are able to stay within the boundaries of your priorities, that is the most important thing. I hope you'll like and subscribe and come back and join us in our next video. Thank you so much. I will talk to you again soon. Take care.